Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I am your hostess with the mostest, Luna fucking Rose. And this is Recovery in the Raw. Um, a quick description of what we do here is this is a platform where real recovering addicts share their experience, strength, and hope, and we feature one or more speakers each week whose story will be recorded over the weekend. Graphic language is permitted. In the meantime, we encourage you to leave your comments. We upload daily recordings with captioning provided as an option of the daily JFT and SPAD readings from Narcotics Anonymous, although we are not affiliated with NA or any other 12-step fellowship approved literature is permitted. Just remember this is your recovery in the raw. The seventh tradition of NA does not apply to this podcast or any other recovery uh, um, program. However, donations are accepted to cover the upkeep and maintenance of this channel, any remaining funds beyond expenses will be sent to a recovery nonprofit organization. If you would like to speak, we would love to hear your story. Or if you would like to donate, please send either a request to recovery in the raw 2050 at gmail.com. Thank you and many blessings. And today we have just the guy who does the JFT and SPAD recordings for the podcast every morning. And I upload those when I can. But we, for the sake of it, are going to call him Sammy-O, or Southern Sammy. But anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sammy. He is also my sponsor. He's got clean time over a year now, and he's full of recovery wisdom. And with that, again, Sammy, introduce yourself.
Oh, well, thank you, Luna. Sammy-O, great for recovering addict. What a lovely intro. I appreciate that. And it's an honor to be here. This has kind of been a long time coming. We've talked about it a lot, and now we're watching it come to be. And I'm a real believer in all things happen for a reason when they happen for the reasons that they happen in. And so I think we're meant to be in this moment in time right now. Um, It won't take me but just a couple of minutes to qualify because I want to get into whatever questions you might have, Luna. Um, Born in 1958 in South Carolina, son of a Southern Baptist ordained minister, and I had like the perfect life as a little boy between the ages of birth and 10. And I wanted to be my dad. He was the guy that I looked up to. And then something happened. Something very, very dark happened, and all that changed. And I suddenly found myself the middle child of three siblings, all boys, basically being raised by a father who was no longer interested in engaging in any way, shape, or form. So that started in me changes in my behavior that I took into my adult life that I didn't really realize were there until well into my adult life. But it explains a lot about my behavior exiting out of active addiction just a little over a year and a half ago. By the time I graduated from high school, I'd already had an exit plan to leave home because I was not going to stay there and continue to live under the abuse in our household, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all kinds of mental abuse. And I was already suffering some survivor's guilt at leaving home because I was leaving my mom behind to deal with it as best that she could, and also leaving my little brother behind. But in that moment, when I was 18 years old, about to graduate high school, I had to like fly, man. I had to get out of there. I had to find out what I was all about, what my life was supposed to be all about. So I joined the Air Force right out of high school. Of course, I'm from South Carolina, as I said in the beginning. I went through basic training and I went through technical school to be an aircraft mechanic. Interesting to know that of all the qualifying um, battery tests that you have to take to find the best fit for where you belong in the Air Force. There's administrative, there's technical, there's computer, there's mechanical. I scored the lowest on mechanical ability, so they decided to make me an aircraft mechanic. Okay, fill the quota. So there I went to tech school to become an aircraft mechanic. So on the day that they announced where we would all be permanently stationed for the first time, and they announced that they were sending me to Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, South Carolina, I can remember how disappointed I was because they were sending me back home. I didn't want to go back home, but then at the same time, I heard all of my buddies in the background saying, "Wow, Myrtle Beach, Myrtle Beach, Myrtle Beach." So it turned out to be good because it was the kind of base that was a rapid deployment force, and it deployed all around the world. So I got to enjoy a lot of world travel very, very early on. But in terms of how this fits into my addiction, when I graduated from basic military training and I went to the base where I was to be trained as a mechanic, the very first thing I did on the first night I was there was to go to a pizza parlor on base by myself because I didn't know anybody. Order a pitcher of beer, order a pizza, eat the pizza, drink the beer, get drunk, threw up on myself, threw up on a couple of other unsuspecting people, rinse and repeat for the better part of 47 years. It was on that day and on that night where I believe that I became an alcoholic. Now, I look back on my history and I know that through family records and whatnot, that I am genetically predisposed to alcoholism and drug addiction, but that would not have changed my intent in that moment. And I think being of a very young age, that's kind of common. Well, we're 10 foot tall and bulletproof for a very long time. So this was a pattern of behavior that just went on for years and years and years. I was in the Air Force for 14 years. And I finally got kicked out for smoking weed. Every job I've ever had in life, every single job except for one, I was discharged for cause for either drug or alcohol abuse. So how I managed to even draw anything resembling a Social Security check, I don't know. I got really lucky back in the early 1990s. But job after job after job, come and gone, come and gone, come and gone. When I got kicked out of the Air Force, wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. It was a general discharge, which means it's a lot less bad for you in terms of it didn't equal a felony or anything like that. I could still vote and move about the country. But I moved to San Francisco where my brother lived at the time. He was ill with HIV. I was very much a functioning drug addict. I was very good at whatever job I had. I did a good job, but the addiction started taking its toll. I drank more and I used more. And just like our literature says, this is a progressive disease, and my disease progressed. And it progressed to the point that on December the 17th, 1992, I was working in Oakland, California, and I knew that I was going to get a phone call letting me know that my brother's time was nigh and that I would need to come to his bedside. So I got the phone call that day. And did I go directly to his bedside? No, I did not. I hopped on the subway from Oakland to San Francisco. I popped in to a place to visit my drug dealer and picked up some drugs. And then I popped into a bar and slammed back a couple of shots of Jack Daniels. And then I went to go see my brother. The consequence of that action is I walked into a room where I had a hysterical mother who was with her dead son, that I had not been there to witness his passing because what was more important to me in that moment was fueling my addiction and had nothing to do with embracing any kind of recovery. That should have gotten my attention. Was that the rock bottom that got my attention? No, it didn't. The drug use got worse. It went from bad to worse. I'm going to fast forward to July the 9th, 2003. I had been homeless for 3 to 4 years by that time. Um, I was in the grip of what I, to this day, think was the most insidious of all the DOCs I ever used, and this one was a stimulant. I think that's all I really need to say. But I found myself wandering around the Tenderloin in San Francisco after I'd been up for 9 days. And I smelled coffee. I was a bit delirious, probably a lot psychotic. But there were people standing out on the sidewalk, chatting and hugging and smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and eating donuts. And somebody called me over. Hey, brother, you want a cup of coffee? Come on in. Sure, absolutely. I had no idea that it turned out to be the very first AA meeting I ever went to. It's called the Hair of the Dog meeting, Saturday morning of the first place group of Alcoholics Anonymous. That set into motion uh, my first experience in recovery starting in 2003. I started going to meetings. I started showing up. I started doing service, started stacking chairs, making coffee, greeting people, handing out IPs, uh, participating. Did all those things, went all through the motions. Ended up being this guy in San Francisco that people were inviting me to speak at their meetings all the time. That really made me feel some kind of way. Wow, look at me. I'm doing so great. So I'm doing all these things, but when I look back on that now, I had never surrendered to the disease. I didn't have a sponsor, and I didn't work a single step. So my inaction of those three things, I believe, are what led me back to the same place I was before all that happened. And the disease took a hold once again, like it had before, in wherever I showed up in life. Fast forward to 2018, I was working one of the very last jobs I would ever have in the workforce. And I just started displaying some symptoms that were concerning to me that caused my doctor to schedule a colonoscopy. Now, I'm 60 years old at this point, and it was like my 50-year colonoscopy that I just shined on and forgot to get. That was a bad idea because those symptoms turned into a diagnosis of stage 3 colon cancer, of which they said we can try to get it, but we don't think we're going to be able to. I'm so sorry, Mr. O. Went through a extremely aggressive regimen of chemo and radiation. But where this addict found himself in that moment was where many of us dream of getting to be, which is a place where there was an unlimited amount of narcotics at my disposal. All I had to do is ask for it. And if I needed more than what I had, they'd approve that too. So I found myself very quickly within this regimen of chemo and radiation having an insane tolerance on two types of medication that I did not need because I didn't have the symptoms I was asking them to address. I was doing it because I was a drug addict and I wanted the drugs. Well, that very nearly killed me. Um, what really got my attention after my primary doctor helped me wean off of the opioids not once but twice. He was in process of helping me get off the benzodiazepines when I fell and broke a wrist bone. First time I'd ever broke a bone in my body. And it was because I was so out of control using these substances that I couldn't stop using, that every area of my life had become unmanageable. Every area of my life. I met the man that would become my sponsor, I believe, in 2014 over a video call with a mutual friend of ours that um, she used to work in the same profession that he does. So I had known of him and had had many conversations with him for a number of years before we actually met. But the very first time I met him was in March of 2022 when he had occasion to come here with our mutual friend at their home to attend a surprise birthday party. And I was so looking forward to meeting him because I knew that he was in recovery. I knew that he didn't drink or drug and he had this fabulous life. And I was really kind of fascinated with him, but I didn't really know to the extent of the kind of person that he was. And within the very first 30 minutes of us meeting each other, he had identified himself as an addict and an alcoholic in recovery. And I had identified that about myself to him, which I think he had known, and I think that I had known all along. But that led to the relationship that we have to this day, to where we talk almost every single day. Um, and if it were not for the experience, strength, and hope that he brings to me in doing the step work and allowing myself to be open to the suggestions of a predecessor, I wouldn't be here today. I had started going to meetings with him virtually. He was on one side of the world and I was over here. And we started doing that frequently, but I still had not surrendered. This was in 2023. Still hadn't surrendered. And so I was kind of going through the same motions again with a different person in a different format. And I found myself behaviorally not growing and not healing in any way, shape, or form. And then on January the 31st, 2024, I took advantage of my best friend and bullied him into giving me a couple of narcotics that I did not need. I only needed them because I wanted them and I knew that I could get them from him. But after I did that, my behavior shocked me so much to my core that that's what I'm going to consider uh, my deepest, most heinous rock bottom I ever experienced. Because what I did, I put into immediate jeopardy of losing the one person I had in my life that loved me unconditionally. And I had breached that trust and gave him every reason to walk away. Well, I called Tom the next morning, February the 1st, 2024. I was pretty hysterical still about what I had done. And he listened as he always does. And he said the sweetest things a man has ever said to me when he said, Sammy, why don't you let me be your sponsor? Of course, yes, please. Yes, thank you. It was on that day that I surrendered to this disease. It was on that day that he became my sponsor. It was on that day that he gave me my first assignment in step one. And it was on that day that I began to heal. I have not looked back since that day. So, in terms of that, I cannot say that relapse is a part of my program because since I started working this program with sincerity, thoroughness, and honesty and transparency and clarity, both to myself and other people, I was not in recovery. So, how can I relapse from something I don't have experience with? Now that I do have experience with it, a year, 7 months, and 8 days, I think. I don't have my app in front of me. But now that I have that experience behind me based on the work that I've done and the suggestions that are given to me by my sponsor, I can very, very easily make an informed decision about not picking up a drug today. There is not a single thing that could come crashing down other than perhaps an airplane through the roof of my house that could cause me to make that choice. Now, that's not to say that I'm always going to make the right choice if it's presented to me, but I could just say today that no. So on that day, December the 1st, 2024, started working the steps. It took me damn near a year to do all three. And then I got stuck on step four. I got stuck for over 8 months. And I'm still trying to justify getting stuck because there were circumstances and people and places and things that were kind of in the way that were happening at the same time. But at the end of the day, that was just me being deflecting about things, and you know, not taking accountability for my part. And my part was that I used to say, well, I just wasted my time and this person wasted my time too. But that's not true because the lesson learned was don't waste that time in the first place if you already know what the parameters are supposed to be between people. And I did. And I chose to remain in the excitement of the drama rather than be the responsible sponsor that I should have been and lay down exactly what the relationship is supposed to be. So that's on me. Nobody else. It's on me. But on step four, and I'll end with this. Once I realized that there's not a person in the world that will ever be more critical of me than me, then it made it a little bit easier to accept and even to like have a discussion with myself about what these character defects were. And furthermore, okay, why am I still clinging on to this particular character defect today when it manifested itself in a resentment 40 years ago? So this whole journey of discovery of self, for me, it hasn't concluded just because I'm done with the fourth step. Um, because the program itself never concludes. It's a continual, um, it's a continual thing. It's almost like perpetual motion in a way. It never stops being needed. Um, so I'm looking forward to whatever the next chapter is in terms of step work with Tom. Looking forward to going to a meeting with him tonight. He's somewhere. I don't know where he's at. He's somewhere on the Pacific Ocean, um, on a boat, a ship. And but I found a meeting in a different fellowship, in one of the fellowships that we belong to, that we may attend together. And I'm looking forward to that. It's always nice to spend time with him. But I think I'll stop there. And Luna, you can poke me with a stick for a while if you'd like.
No, I got nothing. You're good. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, so, going back, obviously your father took a stage left on the family, so to speak. Um, but did he suffer with addiction as well?
um, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did. It was not something that we as children were aware that that's what was happening. But looking back on it now, yeah, I can see that it was a revolving door of in and out of the psych ward for the purpose of drug shopping. He was always on some kind of drug, some kind of mood,
Yeah.
And back in the '60s and '70s, they were just handing out Valiums and Ativans and all that stuff. You could buy. There was something called Paragoric, which you could buy all over the counter back in the day that had opiates in it. But yeah, to answer your question, absolutely he was.
Yeah, and even at a youthful age, you're taking that stuff in, you're perceiving it, may not understand what it is, but you're still taking that shit in. Um, and so often I told myself, that I would never be that way, and it ended up being that way, and it's hard to explain when you grow into life and you experience trauma and traumatic events, and you suffer from PTSD and all this other stuff. It also plays a big role in the amount of drugs we use as addicts, I think.
Well, you make an important point about. I've had the realization too that behaviorally, in many areas, I did become my father. There's a song called "Cats in the Cradle."
And a silver spoon, the little boy blew at the man in the moon when you're coming home.
Yeah, I've become just like you, Dad.
Yeah.
Finally, I've become just like you. And that was a real hard pill for me to swallow because I absolutely detest some of his behaviors that I recognize in myself. Sneaky behavior, deceptive, manipulative.
All summed up as
Uh,
an addict's behavior.
oh, yeah. And I got good at it. I knew how to get what I wanted. I still do.
We all do as addicts, I believe.
Yeah. Hmm.
it's fight or flight out here. It's survive or don't survive. When you're an addict. Um, and as far as the military goes, them shipping you back home, like they now no longer do that. They send people that are from South Carolina or the East Coast. They'll send them to the West Coast, and the people from the West Coast they'll send to the East Coast, so they're not too close to home. Um, and also then too, I think it's easy for people to get distracted because they're back home, and they feel more comfortable and they drink more and they party more, and because they're
Yeah.
home, they're home. Yeah, and I think that may have, if I'm not mistaken, would that have played a role with you in the fact that you partied harder because you were more comfortable? Uh,
Well, yeah, the first couple of years were kind of weird, right? So between 76 and 80, I'm like between the ages of 18 and 20. And I'm stationed at Myrtle Beach, and my home is only like 2.5 hours from there. So I was still going back and forth, really just trying to salvage the family that I had just fled from to see if I could, do something about it
yeah,
since I was stationed at Myrtle Beach anyway. That didn't work out very well. So my entrance into like really being rebelliously uh, active in my addiction and drinking came within that first 3 years after being in Myrtle Beach because I was very infrequently going back and forth to home on the weekends at that point because I was much more interested in developing my drinking and my drugging career. When I realized that, okay, I can't do anything about the home life. I got away from it as far as I could. I'm at Myrtle Beach. I'll deal with it. And as it turns out, because of all the deployments that we went on from Myrtle Beach, I was rarely at Myrtle Beach at all for those 5 years. We were always gone somewhere, so worked out fine.
yeah, and now, like, to be, you were, honorably discharged, right? So, like,
Mhm.
to be discharged because of marijuana now, given the fact that it's so accepted today, it kind of feels like a slap in the face to many who have been charged in the past and had their careers end because of it. And you, you know, but as the world goes on, the drugs get harder and harder and harder. And it's not so much the weed anymore as it is the other shit. You know?
Well, I look back on events in my life, and the event of me getting kicked out of the Air Force is an interesting one because I believe that HP, whoever he, she, or it is, has been looking out for me even during those times when I didn't know that I needed to be looked out for. I'll tell you why. At that time in 1990, military people that were getting kicked out for smoking weed were being dishonorably discharged as a matter of course. I have to this day no idea why they did not categorize mine as honorable. All I know is I dodged a bullet on that.
You mean dishonorable? Yeah, they didn't.
They
They
did
did
not they
right.
did not dishonorably discharge me, and they were dishonorably discharging everyone else for the same offense. And the categorization of discharge was misconduct, drug abuse.
Well.
Yeah.
I want to bring up another point here too. Is so often than not, a lot of addicts, um, we're constantly on a cycle of rinse, wash, repeat.
Hmm.
And I think that recovery in itself is a great program. I've seen people survive through the program without a sponsor, without step work. But I think it's strongly encouraged. Like, for example, if you go to church, you're reading the Bible, you're expected to kind of live those morals. Yeah, you know what I
Yeah.
mean. That's the point of attending that kind of congregation. And
Hmm.
then and the same in recovery is that I think it's important. Now, it's not necessary. Like, people can go fuck off and do three Hail Marys and be okay. Yeah, 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 you know what I mean? And it's not necessary to survive as a human being or an individual or an addict to do the steps, but it's strongly encouraged. Because I think it helps peel back the layers, um, so to speak. Self realization is in itself such an awakening moment, and you find that out in step four.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, if somebody were to like throw a copy of the basic text to me and say, if you don't follow this to the letter, you're gonna fucking die, I wouldn't come anywhere near it.
Yeah. Well, it's
But
the
when it,
same. You're not going to die if you don't accept God or whoever as your higher power. You're not going to die.
now, why
You-
why is death meant as any kind of threat anyway? It's a foregone conclusion.
right? Why does it got to go there? Right? Why does it got to go there? Like, whoa, whoa, that's a little deep. Why does it got to go
Yeah.
there? And no, I will say it's an addict's decision on whether or not recovery is enough to be life or death.
Well, okay, I might agree to disagree on that one because that almost infers that an addict um, can give themselves to permission to say, "I'm kind of an addict, but I'm kind of not."
But that does happen.
Yeah, but what did that? I wouldn't. What?
I
Yeah,
mean,
definitely. Yeah,
uh,
why would somebody do that?
yeah. Well, the thing is too is you said something about relapse. You've not experienced that, and you said it's not a part of your recovery, and it to me is not a part of anyone's recovery. It exists in people's recovery. Um, Yeah, and, I mean, it exists in recovery, but it becomes a part of their recovery if they continue to relapse. And I have been a habitual relapser, and
Well,
I can tell that slap in the face is constantly rinse, wash, repeat. And I got to understand that I'm not some superhero. I'm a
right.
human.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even like the word relapse. I wish there were a different word for it. Um, I mean, just for me, right? In my story here and right now, let's call it a relapse. What if Sammy relapses? Well, it would be because Sammy made the choice to pick up instead of making the choice to not pick up. It's just that simple.
But that's when you decided that it was going to be life for you. Like, even for me, if I'm a chronic relapser, I'm still coming to meetings because I've understood that meeting makers make it. And I didn't understand that until I was going to, recovery for over a year. And
Yeah,
eventually,
but every moment where a person comes to that crossroad to pick up or not to pick up doesn't have to be based on a life defining moment.
well, right. No, no, it
It can
doesn't.
be it can be as simple as, you know what, I've done this for 583 days in a row. I probably can do it for one more day and it won't kill me. All I'm bringing into the discussion is the thought process behind this. And for me, yeah, it is life. Uh, it is a matter for me, a life or death. It can be. And it can be for anybody else. And just because somebody decides in that moment that it's not a life or death decision for them doesn't mean that picking up won't kill them.
Right. Well, I always tell people too that a gun is just a gun on the table until it's not.
That's right.
And you never know, it's like playing Russian roulette with yourself. You never know when that bullet's going to come out. So for me, it's life or death. I mean, it may not be for others, but for me, it's this is something I will always have to do. Because you said the
Yeah.
journey never ends, and it never
No,
ends.
no, it never does. And I mean, I think part of my ability to keep the willingness to like live in this manner, live this new way, is that I have accepted that it is a journey, and and because it is, may as well enjoy the ride as best I can.
Now, let me ask you a question here.
Mhm.
All right, in the past, let's see, your clean date was February 1st, 24. Um, so, um, in that, do you find your clean life less amusing than it would have been when using? A lot of people, they sometimes think like, oh, life's gonna suck being clean. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no, no, it's funny as fuck. It's a lot funnier. And I think it's funnier because I can now like find the humor in poignant stuff, hilarious stuff that might not have seemed so funny back in the day. But yeah, it's funny as hell.
Well, and the thing is too is that you also talked about the drama in the rooms, and that happens anywhere. It happens in any congregation, any gathering. It's going to happen. You're going to have
Right?
drama, but I will say, my life, is pretty drama free for the most part. But like, I like to watch it on TV, and I
Yeah,
like to, sometimes I'm going to say, sometimes going to
yeah,
the meetings. That's what gets me back to the meetings is listening to other people's bullshit. You,
yeah.
you know what I mean? And sometimes it's so easy to get wrapped up into that and lose sight of our recovery because
Right.
then we start to, try to clean someone else's road instead of ours.
It's easy to do that. I mean, I've been in some groups where the necessity to practice, principles over personalities is like really, really important. And others is a little less rigid, but
And that's
I don't
exactly
know.
why you have different denominations and different religions.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to hear about a Methodist, go to a Methodist church, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, believe me, I was, baptized Lutheran, raised in a Methodist church, and then went to a Pentecostal, and that
Right.
was that was a hell of a switch. And
I'm sure.
the same can be said for any brick and mortar meeting or any Zoom meeting that happens in recovery. The same can be said there. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean? People are going to be people at the end of the day, and addicts are even. It's even worse because people are going to be addicts, and addicts are going to be addicts.
It's kind
Yeah,
of interesting, I think, because uh, going into like a congregation of like a Baptist church, like here in North Augusta, is a little bit like going into a large NA meeting in sort of a wealthy area of town because you walk in there and you're wondering yourself, is this a fashion show or what have I walked into?
like I would like to go to a meeting where they had like how do you say hors d'oeuvres,
Hors d'oeuvres?
hors d'oeuvres, yeah. Yeah, like that would be nice, not just a jelly donut and a coffee. Some hors d'oeuvres would be nice.
Oh my God. San Francisco is the place to get stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
we
bet, I
we,
bet.
we put
Like
it on. Yeah,
they
yeah.
probably have their own like celebrity recovery programs
They probably do. They probably do. It's been a
where they
long
have
time.
caviar and
Goose liver pate was one thing. That was nice.
I could go for some tiramisu.
Mm, I'd love that.
But yeah, so I mean, there are benefits to recovery, and I think the most benefit that comes to people in recovery is when they work the step work and
Mhm.
reveal in step 4, because see, here's the thing about working steps is because just because you work them once doesn't mean that scenarios and different things in your life don't occur. There
Hmm.
will always occur, and things will always be different, and things will always change.
Yep.
So it's always good to take a moral inventory of yourself, and I think that's what I mean, that's exactly what the step work does.
Well, I think so too, and I think that the beauty of it, at least I hope this will be my experience, is the next time I do step forward, I'm not saying it's going to be easier, but it won't be nearly as frightening or fearful about getting into it.
Well, people, they fear these things, and I think part of the reason is because, like you've said and I have talked about before, self deception's a bitch.
Yep.
And then when you realize that you're not perfect,
Yep.
and that people can't, I always expected people to bend to what I wanted.
Right.
You know what I mean? Throughout my relationships and stuff, and addiction, has always been a part of my relationships, and I wish to God it never was, but it always is. And for you, what about your relationships through life? Well, I know you talked about your best friend, who I do know. And you try to sway one on him with drugs, and that must have been a terrible feeling for you to realize that you would stab a buddy in the back.
Trying to think what relationship that you're referring to. I don't
You
know.
you said that you had a good friend
Uh,
who you tried to get drugs off of, and that's what was the game changer for you. That was your bottom low.
oh
When
yeah, yes, absolutely. That was January 31st, 2024. That was the lowest point. Is I pulled such an addict maneuver for no reason other than I knew that I could. And it's like, have I learned nothing?
and
You
my
know?
thing is like that was a self realization for you when you realized that you would turn against even your buddy just
Yep,
to try to get what you wanted.
absolutely. I had an uncle who he died sober, many, many decades sober, and he was like a pretty involved in AA. He told me one time, he said, "You know what, Sammy, until the day I die, and I love your auntie to death, but until the day I die, a bottle of beer is always going to be my first girl." And that's like, wow, that's an interesting realization, is that you have to put your recovery against that monster right in front of you each and every single day. I do.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you make at a part of your routine, just like getting up and getting a cup of coffee in the morning.
Hmm.
You make it a part of your routine. And for me, like working out, I make sure I work out at least twice a week. Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
I know.
but it's the dedication, and I'll tell you, it does get easier clean because you start realizing talents that you never knew you really had. If
True.
you really get into yourself, like I've written books, I've sung songs, I've written songs, I've
Right.
done. I've done it all,
Right.
and you're well known, through the LGBTQ community. And that's because of your sponsor, and and you, and life. And that's what makes it relatable too, is because there's all different kinds in NA.
Oh my goodness, so many different kinds. Um, and not just people with
Or
creative,
recovery period. Yeah.
yeah, recovery period, not just people with like creative expression or anything like that, but people that are deep thinkers and philosophers and poets and housewives and truck drivers and all kinds of flavors that just make such a beautiful group of people. I mean, the Misfits is amazing. They're an amazing group.
And that is a recovery meeting that both Sammy and I attend.
Hmm.
And it opens our eyes because somewhere in life, it can always be worse.
Oh yeah,
It can always be worse, and someone has it worse than you.
yep, always, always. I'm thinking about that very thing on my walk today. It's like, okay, I got to stop every 100 feet or 150 feet and take a rest. But the gratitude there is that I can stop every 150 feet and take a rest.
Right.
So, yeah,
All right. So
yeah.
let me ask you a couple key questions I have here that are kind of cool. How do you think someone can stay motivated during recovery?
Um, I've got one sponsee that keeps me motivated in my recovery when he shares his victories with me. And this is a kid that we share the same DOC, the same way that we did it. So many similarities that lend itself to the behaviors that come with that. And he is like every single day amazing himself and the people around him on how he feels differently and how he looks at things differently, not using drugs because he doesn't have anything to compare it to. So he might be on like a pink cloud of sorts, which is fine.
Now
Never negate
describe that. Describe pink cloud for people.
the pink cloud. Um, Best way I know how to describe it. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was a antidepressant drug called Prozac, and there was a cartoon floating around for many years of this kind of portly cartoon looking guy with his arms thrown up in the air, and the caption read, "I'm having a Prozac moment." I had a Prozac moment one time when I first was prescribed Prozac. It was about 4 weeks after I started taking it. I was walking down Cesar Chavez Street in San Francisco. And suddenly I was that cartoon guy, and I was going, I'm having a Prozac moment. It was a moment of clarity where, wow, this is what it feels like to be normal. This is what normal feels like. This feels good. Well, that's kind of like a pink cloud. This is what normal feels like. I want to hold on to this as long as I possibly can.
Now life does hit you in the face.
And it does.
Life does punch you in the face, and sometimes it knocks us down from that cloud.
It
And
does.
there's actually a song written by a group called, and I hold no rights to this, but it's called Bush, and they sing a song called "Come Down," and it's talking about how he doesn't want to come back down from this cloud.
Uh-huh.
And it's regarding drug use, yeah, and so often, addiction's just like bed bugs. They're not picky.
Right. Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter who you are, how you got there. Once an
You can
addict,
get a bed bug. That's right.
once an addict, always an addict. And I
Mhm.
tell, I was in a meeting sharing yesterday, and sharing helps. Definitely helps with recovery. But like I was explaining how the disease of addiction is almost like getting bit by like a zombie, and if like it gets or a snake, and if it gets to your heart, you're fucked. You know what I mean? So you got to
Yep.
amputate. You got to amputate that
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
before it reaches your heart. And I think that that's kind of what recovery is cauterizing the wound or amputating it or treating it. So you stay alive. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like Prozac for addicts. And so
Right.
isn't and religion is like that for normies or whoever.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same principle, um, but it's got to be severed, and then you got to look back on how you got to that point in the beginning. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's working steps. And how do you feel that how do you think self compassion impacts recovery
Oh
with
my
you
goodness.
and your sponsees and understanding?
Oh, well, that's a real big, really good point on the importance of practicing enormous amounts of compassion. I can't empathize with every single thing that a sponsee has gone through. I mean, who can? But I do feel like it's important to practice a lot of tolerance and patience. And those are two things that I'm not not really good at that I'm working on. But to answer your question, is really, really important. I mean, I don't think there is a sponsee in the world that would respond to a sponsor that they felt did nothing but criticize them. You've got to. I feel like it's important to acknowledge and validate what somebody has done. You acknowledge their growth. How can they know? How can you know unless somebody tells you? So no,
Yes.
I'm not a big fan of the waggy finger.
And another question, would be like, for instance, addicts understanding addicts, and let's say you try to stab your friend in the back for the drugs, you try to pull one on them. Um, how do you think someone can rebuild trust after a difficult recovery journey? Like, how do you think someone can rebuild that? What did you do to rebuild that trust?
So this is a great question, and the answer is real simple. You rebuild trust with your actions. I use this all the time. I know Dr. Phil's not a real doctor, but he said one thing a long time ago. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So to change future behavior, you have to change present behavior. And once you change present behavior, you start building credibility with the person that you breached their trust with. Are you on? Am I on the witness stand insofar as he's concerned? Of course I am. That's exactly where I belong, is on the witness stand. What are you going to do now, Sammy? What are your words going to mean this time? So, not such a short answer is reestablishing credibility through actions, not words, actions.
Correct, though. I would have to
Yeah.
agree. Why do you what do you think about setbacks? How do they affect recovery? Let's say, for example, one day you're having a health crisis and you don't have everything you need. Uh,
Ah, okay. I understand your question now. Yeah, okay. In that case, I have had setbacks. I've had a lot of setbacks, but those setbacks are just merely, adjustments in that moment of life on life's terms. They're going to happen. Things are not going to happen the way that I want them to happen every single minute of every single day.
and that's where
And
the
yeah,
serenity prayer comes in.
oh my goodness, yes. And I got to remember to say that, how important that is in the moment. You brought that to my attention not too terribly long ago, but I was in the middle of minefield in my head. Um, yeah, that's a great tool to recenter oneself in those moments of setback, like you say. Um,
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the
there's
things I
things, the things
can,
I can,
and the
the
wisdom to know
wisdom,
the
know
difference.
the difference. That's right.
And that is so true. And you talked
It's a
about
powerful.
how you didn't like the word relapse. I guess I would say, for the wise ones, it would be, hopefully a chance of self discovery. For like instance, if Thomas Edison's working on a light bulb, he discovered that he can't make it a certain way. You know what I mean? And then instead perfected it after so many other attempts. So the key to success is failure, according to Thomas Edison. Um, and he figured out 5,000 ways on not how to make a light bulb, but only one right way. But he didn't give up. He didn't give up. He just kept on going and kept on going and kept on going and got what he wanted out of it. You know what I
What,
mean?
an- what an interesting exercise that must have been for someone who not once tried the same thing twice, right? Which means he not for a moment stayed in the definition of insanity. He looked for a solution until he found one. Love that. That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say instead of relapse. That is it's hopefully finding a solution. And for me, that solution is recovery. It's not for everybody, but it's for me. Um, and that in itself is a solution.
Well, it can be for a lot of people. I mean, after a relapse, if someone is lucky enough not to have lost their lives by taking something that they did or didn't know what it actually was, then good for making it back into the room. Glad you didn't die.
Yeah.
And maybe the lesson learned is, okay, do I have to really go through that another time? What about this time made it so special?
And let me reiterate is that you don't have to have a, again, like you said, you don't have to have a traumatic experience to get into recovery. You don't have to have this bottom low.
No, you don't. No, you don't have to. Yeah, and that's a really good point too. Not everybody arrives, gnashing their teeth, beating their breast, and saying, "Woe is me."
Right. I've seen youth, 18 and up come in and
Hmm.
they're combating it early.
Yep.
And that's amazing. That's because recovery is becoming more mainstream now with social
Yep.
media and everything
Yep.
else. And I think, I haven't looked up statistics personally, but I would think that there is a majority of young youths that come out of college addicts.
Oh, I would say I'm sure that's right, especially
Because crunch time happens, they're doing this, that, the other to cram in for, essays and exams and, all this stuff. And I think the majority of the youth, they come out addicts because of their drug use on trying to crunch everything in. And that's why we're seeing a lot of youth now
yeah.
come in.
Being a student in America today is insane with what the requirements are. It's
Absolutely.
not what it used to be at all. Mm.
I mean, it used to be back in the day, you could get a degree for anything.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's sad. It's and the world just keeps turning, and it just keeps getting more worse as we evolve. You know what I mean? Because now we're in everybody's business and not just our own.
Right. I mean, privacy is a thing of the past as far as I'm concerned. I
It
mean,
doesn't exist.
no, it doesn't.
Let me ask you. Let's see. What is the most important thing you remember about recovery? Would you um, what is? Would you like to reiterate? Like, what is the most self realization moment you had working up to step 4 so far?
Um, Probably the most important self-realization I had was once I accepted the character defects that I identified, especially in these last few resentments. Once I identified those and accepted them as the part that I played in the resentment, um, I realized that I could let it go and that never had to be repeated again. Um, so that realization, I think I explained this yesterday or day before. Once Tom told me that I was done working step 4, I had like this moment of I can't really describe, which was like, oh, okay, well, what do I do now? Because I had been working so hard on on doing this, and so yeah, that would be the realization is that once I accept and acknowledge it and let it go, um, I don't have to do it again. It's like a one-off.
Yeah. But again, each situation changes.
Well, it does. And to speak to your point, yeah, when I get back to doing step four again, yeah, it's just going to be a matter of the only thing different is that the resentments will be different. That's all.
But not everyone gets that whoa experience either.
No, they don't. I don't know how to tell you to get it other than to do the work. To do the work. If my sponsor had not kind of started bearing down kind of hard on me about this, and his reasons are perfectly valid. Relapse, resentment is the number one cause of relapse, and relapse is the number one cause of death in active addiction. So, the importance of doing a thorough and fearless moral inventory in step four just cannot be denied, at least not for me.
And that would be chalked up as relapse prevention. Um, Staying in the program, doing what you're doing, working the literature, reading the literature.
Yep,
And you're my sponsor, and you've gotten on me about step work, and sometimes, yeah, I mean, it's a marathon, not a race.
that's right.
And you were stagnant on step four for months.
I sure was.
And that's okay. No one's telling you to hurry up, but they do want you, like, if you're going to have a sponsor, they want you to work the steps. Yeah,
Yeah,
they want you to help yourself, because so often, could I come as a sponsee and say, "Oh, I have this problem, I have that problem, and this problem," but no self-realization because I'm not working that step work.
right.
Um, and that's where it can be frustrating as a sponsor, to say, well, all these things can be avoided if you just take a look at yourself.
Yeah. And you know what? You can tell a person that 100 times till you're blue in the face, and until they are prepared to hear the words, then they're not. I wasn't prepared to accept um, that part of doing the step work
Now,
um, till I had that realization.
let me also say that there's a catch 22 to sponsor sponsee relationship. It's sponsor sponsee sponsee sponsor relationship, which means that, like, just because you have more clean time than me doesn't mean that I don't have the experience of recovery, which means that, like, I can help you self-realize things that you may not see, and you can help self-realize things for me that I may not see. And that's why an intimate relationship with a sponsor is important. I think that if you don't say at the time that you have the best sponsor in the world, but then you need to find another sponsor, one that adheres to you and one that fits to you at that time. Now, I can't say when my second step work comes around that I won't have a different sponsor.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But for now, for me right now, it's you, and it has been for quite some time. But we both build and learn off each other as the days go on.
Right. Well, we as the fellowship, we use like the clean date as like a litmus, as a piece of paper. And to your point, absolutely, I would never ever dismiss any of the experience, strength, and hope that somebody had prior. I mean, it happens all the time. People come in with 5, 10, 15, 20 years and they relapse or they choose to go out and use all that experience, strength, and hope that they had during the 20 years. They didn't lose that. So a sponsor should never dismiss that
And
ever.
you're cutting your excuse me, you're cutting yourself off from an opportunity to learn something if you're only
That's
going to be
right.
one-sided about something.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Each one teach one, they say.
Yeah, and life in recovery isn't easy. It's the what do they say? The road to success is narrower than the road to destruction. The road to destruction, you could drive, you could land a jumbo jet. The
Yeah.
road to success is a lot more narrow.
Yeah. That's true.
But it doesn't mean you should give up. You haven't given up this long. Why give up now?
No need.
And I would have to say, even for the youth coming in, there's hope. Even for the newcomer, there's hope.
Oh,
You may you may
especially,
feel more often than not, you have people coming in with their tail between their legs.
right?
And it doesn't mean you should beat yourself up because, like you said, in the end of your share was that we are our own worst critics.
Yep, we
Yeah,
are. Absolutely, we are.
and I always tell people the only one who limits us ultimately is us.
That's right.
That's my quote.
That's true. Very true.
And that is so true. We're the ones who put limitations on ourselves. If I tell you, damn it, I can't work out. Well, then, I'm convincing myself I can't work out when I know that I can't.
Now, I've always been a big believer that, we are the authors of our own successes and our own failures.
I say the universe provides the canvas and we paint the picture.
That's right.
Whether it's a good picture or a bad picture, we paint the picture.
That's right.
And, we're coming up, believe it or not, on the hour. And,
Oh, okay.
I have to say this has been quite an interview. And
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
let me ask you one more thing, and I want you to think deep and good on this. If you could say anything right now that would make a newcomer keep coming back to meetings, what would it be?
Hmm. Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I think I would say, what have you got to lose except to give us a try? Well, don't want to scare you, kid, but you might lose your life. And I'll be like sending that like as a telepathic message to them without saying the words and hope that they pick up on it. That's what I would want to say.
And one more thing, I want to make clear on something. So often do I hear newcomers or people coming in and say, I'm only 23 days clean. There's no only. That is like a cuss word to us in
Right.
recovery. Is that
Right.
when I do exactly what you did. When we hear only, you're like, like there's no such
No,
thing.
no. I'm like, take that back.
Yeah, right. Like there's no such thing as only 2 days, only 24 hours. No,
No.
you're fucking 24 hours clean. You're 1 hour clean. You're 1 day clean. There's not only.
For fuck's sake, right?
I
Jeez.
want to make clear on that. There's not only like give yourself credit is my point. It's like you're beating yourself up before you even have a chance.
Right.
when you
Absolutely.
say when you say only, because then you're like, I only, like, no, I fucking got 24 hours.
I worry about some of these newcomers because, coming out of this one group that kind of went south there was a lot of newcomers, like 18, 19, 20 year olds in there, and they were so excited for their recovery, and then all of a sudden there was no place for anyone to go. And I worry about people like that. Um, I don't know where that came from. I guess the importance of unity within a group is just so important. My God.
It is, and it's people don't understand or take this in when it's said because it's said too often.
Yeah.
But this is all for the newcomer.
Hmm.
Everybody was newcomers at one point. You were a newcomer. Your sponsor was a newcomer. His sponsor was a newcomer. So
That's
I
right.
mean, it's one addict ultimately helping another, and that's what
Right.
this show is about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want no clout, as they say. This is for addicts. If it hits 60 people, it hits 60 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And then if that one person shares and that one person shares, well, it's kind of like an STD. It just spreads.
Right.
But that's what it's because my heart goes out to people like that because I am people like that.
Yeah, me
Right
too.
right now
Me
I
too.
sit before you 53 days clean off a relapse.
Right.
Yeah, and this was my last one. I did a Suboxone that didn't have a blocker, and it could have killed me. It should have killed me.
Yep. Yep.
And I threw up, and I threw up, and you thought being in jail, and you thought tricking, and you thought this and that might have been it, but like I have not had an urge to use since I had taken that, and I
Wow. Amazing.
I just got so sick,
Mm-hmm.
and I was cold, and I thought I was gonna die.
Oh,
Yeah,
my.
I
Wow.
mean, I was still walking around and stuff, but it was like I can't believe it. Like other people couldn't believe it, like that I was still walking around, and I think that also might be because I was born into addiction. I was withdrawing as a baby.
Could have been.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So once I took that stuff into my body, I was just off to the races.
Right.
And that's probably why that Suboxone didn't kill me is because
Mm.
and I wonder statistically if there's a scientific way, if they haven't done it already, to measure someone's adrenaline as an addict or being born
Mm.
into addiction to someone who's not born into addiction, what the adrenaline levels would be.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be interesting. I don't know how they would do that, but
because the adreno levels they could check and see because like I'm manic bipolar 1, so when I get up to that manic point it almost feels like I used. It
yeah, no.
feels like I was zooted on cocaine.
Oh no.
And then coming down, I bawled my eyes out. I
Yeah.
cried like crazy because it was like getting into a major accident and then like all of a sudden, giving it a couple hours to calm down and then you feel the pain.
Right.
And that's what a manic episode is to me. And that's what I explained to my father when I talked to him earlier. I said, that's what it is to me, is that
Right.
I have this
Right.
disability and
Mm-hmm.
it's such a rush because, like, if I have, there's fight or flight, and I'm always fight. Always
Mm-hmm.
fight. There's run away or run towards, and I'm run towards.
Yeah.
You're either a sheep or a wolf in this life, and I'm a wolf.
Yeah.
And, I guess if I have to feel because of the trauma and stuff that I've experienced, if I feel like I've got to defend myself, I
Mm-hmm.
tunnel out
Yeah.
and you're in my line of sight and that's it.
Right.
That's it. And that
Right.
is what we call what, Sammy? A character defect.
A character defect. Yep.
And the thing is that I'm rational enough to know this is what hurts the most.
Yeah. But you'll get to that point, and that's just that's the promise. Part of the promise of freedom from active addiction is that realization. So
Let's talk
you're not
about
there yet.
facing feelings real quick.
Yeah. Well, you will be.
That no 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 I mean like facing your feelings is a big important
Yeah, it
part
is.
part of recovery.
Big time. Huge.
Yeah, you've got to face your feelings and more importantly, face yourself.
That's right.
You can look at a sponsor, and I'll end with this here soon. You can look at a sponsor as a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what I mean? They're going to tell you from an outside point where they think you flaw.
Right.
Not that you fail, but where you flaw. Yeah, you know what I mean? Where you can
Yeah.
improve.
Yep.
Where you can improve.
Yep.
And I'm
And
the same for you.
hmm
It's reciprocated.
well, that's one thing that a sponsor does, and I see that now. Tom did that over and over. He would coax me. He would coax me into saying, "Okay, so you see that is something you could look at. What about this also?" And then I would look and think, and sometimes I'd say, "Yeah." Most of the time, I'd say, "Yeah, yeah, I can see that." But it was his help that got me there.
There's times where I've talked with you and I've mentioned something to you and you're like, I didn't even think of it that way.
That's right. That's
Like,
exactly right. Absolutely right.
and there's times let's be honest, it's a relationship. There's times
It
where
is.
we're I mean, I could say like if we were actually dating, like we'd have a pretty good relationship. There's only a few times where like we combat each other, and that's because
Right.
we have
That's
differences
right.
sometimes.
That's
And
right.
now you're like now like for instance, if I'm on my phone, you're like now I want your attention. If you're not gonna give me your attention, you know what I mean? So it's like that's cool though because like I need to hear that. You know what I mean? Like hey, we're talking, whatever you're doing can wait, If not, call me back when you're done. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do that. And then like so
Well,
it's
your grand sponsor calls me and he says I'm an NA celebrity. No, I'm not an NA celebrity.
well, I'll tell you,
I'm not.
on an ending note there, you know, I used to tell you that I could tell any meeting that you were ever in because you started this, where you go, don't become no matter what, like you do it, don't become no matter what. But everyone does it. Everyone does it now, no matter what, no matter what, don't become no matter what. Everybody does it. It's everywhere, and it's
It's a nice thing.
contagious.
It is a nice thing. It's a
And,
nice
and
sentiment.
and and so in that sense, yeah, you would be a celebrity in the rooms
Yeah,
you're in. I think that you hold a high regard in the recovery program.
that's
Um,
kind of that's
not
great.
everyone's gonna like you. Not everyone's gonna like me.
Nope,
Tough shit.
nope, nope.
But
Can't do
anyway,
anything about
it is now 1:04, which we're a little over an hour.
that. Okay.
So, again, thank you for the interview. It was a long time coming. And also, I do want to, make sure that everyone knows that Sammy is a big part of this podcast. And again, records the JFT and SPAT every day that I upload onto this. And, he's just a big supporter and helps me find people to interview, stuff like that. So, credit needs to be due to him too because he helps keep this going. And I have, some silent partners as well. Shout out to them. And yeah, so with that, we will conclude this episode of Recovery in the Raw. And remember, it is your recovery in the Raw. And we will stop now. Let me see if I can stop it. How do I stop it?